My name is Clara Fields, and for the first 31 years of my life, I believed that my purpose was to be a gentle current in the lives of others. I was the quiet water that smoothed the stones, the steady presence that asked for little and gave what I could. I grew up in the misty, green hills just outside Port Blossom, a city that hugs the coastline, where the scent of salt and pine needles hangs in the air. My life, much like my art, was one of subtle textures and quiet compositions. As a graphic designer, I didn't chase large corporate accounts. I found my joy in creating bespoke wedding invitations, designing logos for small, local businesses, and crafting birth announcements that felt like holding a little piece of a family's joy in your hands. My work was about connection, about capturing the soul of a thing. I thought my marriage was built on the same principle. The mahogany door was slightly ajar, just 3 inches of space between my world before and my world after. Through that gap, I could see the afternoon sunlight streaming across Julian's pristine office, illuminating the prestigious law firm's logo, Croft and Sterling, etched into the glass partition behind his desk. I'd come to bring him the sketchbook he'd left at home, the one filled with his idle doodles and surprisingly thoughtful architectural sketches. It was a small, intimate gesture, a wife's errand. I could hear the soft murmur of voices, his voice, warm and intimate in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in months. It was the voice he used to use when he'd tell me about his dreams, back when we were still building them together. I pushed the door open wider, my heart a fluttering bird in my chest, and there she was. My sister, Sophie. Her sleek blonde bob, a testament to expensive salons and effortless style, was a bright slash against the dark leather of Julian's executive chair. She wasn't just in the chair, she was straddling his lap, her hands woven into his dark, perfectly styled hair. Their mouths were locked together, not with the frantic, messy hunger of a sordid fling, but with a deep, confident passion that spoke of familiarity, of ownership. They didn't hear me enter. They were too lost in a world they had built for two, a world that had no room for me. They were oblivious to the woman who had been married to one of them for 4 years, who had shared secrets and scraped knees with the other for 29 years of sisterhood. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, the sketchbook slipping from my numb fingers and landing on the plush carpet with a soft thud. My entire life, the carefully composed masterpiece I thought I was living, didn't just crumble. It dissolved, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Then Sophie opened her eyes, those bright blue eyes that had always been a shade more vibrant than mine, and saw me over Julian's shoulder. She didn't gasp. She didn't scramble away in shame. She didn't even look surprised. A slow, knowing smile touched her lips. It wasn't a smile of malice, but one of serene victory, as if she had just completed a long and satisfying chess move. "Oh," Sophie said, her voice smooth as silk as she slid from his lap, making no effort to straighten her slightly rumpled blouse. "Clara, you're early. Early." As if this were a scheduled demolition of my heart, as if I had somehow inconvenienced them by walking into my own husband's office. Julian stood, adjusting his tie with the same practiced calm he used before addressing a jury. His brown eyes, the ones I had fallen in love with over lukewarm coffee in our university library, met mine with something that wasn't guilt, but it wasn't defiance either. It was a cool, professional assessment. It was indifference. "We need to talk," he said, as if those 4 words could somehow frame the wreckage of what I'd just witnessed. "About what?" The words came out strangled, a whisper of my own voice. "About how long this has been going on. About how many times you've—" "Clara, please." Sophie's voice carried that familiar note of gentle condescension she'd perfected in our childhood, the tone she used when explaining why her way was simply better. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Harder than it needs to be." I stared at her, really looked at her. Sophie had always been the sun, and I, the quiet shadow. 2 years younger than me, she worked in high-end real estate, a world of sharp suits and sharper negotiations. Today, settling onto the leather couch while Julian remained behind his desk as if this were a client meeting, she looked radiant, invigorated. "How long?" I asked again, the question a lead weight in my throat. Julian and Sophie exchanged a look. It was the kind of intimate, conspiratorial glance that partners share, a silent conversation that excluded me completely. The sight of it was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. "About 10 months, Julian said finally. 10 months. Since my birthday party? The party where Sophie had charmed all of Julian's colleagues, where she'd stayed late to help me clean up, her arm around my shoulder, telling me what a wonderful, supportive wife I was. The party where I had felt a pang of gratitude for her, for my brilliant husband, for my perfect life. 10 months, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Look, Clara," Sophie said, crossing her legs with an air of someone settling in for a rational discussion. "I know this is a shock, but honestly, it's for the best. You and Julian, you've been drifting for ages. Anyone could see it." "Anyone could see it," Julian echoed, his lawyer's voice cool and measured. Our marriage had become a comfortable arrangement, Clara, not a partnership. This just brought things to a head. The audacity was breathtaking. They sat there, the two people I had trusted most in the world, and performed a post-mortem on my marriage as if it were a failed business merger. There were no apologies, no stammered explanations of how it had happened, no expressions of regret for the pain they were causing. Just matter-of-fact cruelty, delivered with the casual indifference of people discussing a change in the weather. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes after the storm has passed, and all that's left is the stark, quiet devastation. "I want you out of the house," I said to Julian, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Clara, be realistic. It's my house. My inheritance paid the down payment, my name is on the deed. You'll be the one leaving. And where am I supposed to go?" Sophie and Julian shared another one of those looks. "Actually," Sophie said, her tone thoughtful, as if she were solving a minor logistical problem, "I've been thinking about that. Mom's been saying she's lonely in that big house since Dad passed. Maybe this is the perfect time for you to move back home. You could help her with the garden." Move back home. At 31, after building a life and a career, they wanted me to retreat to my childhood bedroom, a failure in a floral wallpapered tomb. "Does Mom know?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Sophie's smile widened, a touch of pity in it. "I spoke with her yesterday. She understands. She always said Julian had a fire in him that needed a matching flame." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I was not a flame. I was, at best, a gentle hearth, providing warmth, but no real light. "She's actually relieved, in a way," Sophie continued, relentlessly. "She said it's about time Julian found someone who could truly challenge him, someone who operates on his level." The room seemed to tilt. They hadn't just been having an affair, they had been planning my obsolescence. They had brought my own mother into their conspiracy, drafted a plan for my displacement, and rewritten our family history to justify their betrayal. I looked at Julian, really looked at him, the man I'd supported through law school, who'd promised to be my partner in all of life's quiet and tumultuous moments, who'd whispered that I was his anchor on our wedding night. He was glancing at his watch. "I need some air," I managed, my legs feeling unsteady. "Clara, wait," Julian called as I turned for the door. "We should discuss the practicalities. The divorce, the division of assets." "Assets?" I turned back, a bitter laugh bubbling up inside me. "What assets, Julian? Everything is in your name. Remember? You said it was simpler for tax purposes." He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. "Well, yes, but we can work something out. I'm not an unreasonable man." Unreasonable. The man who had been sleeping with my sister for nearly a year was concerned about being perceived as unreasonable. I left without another word, the sound of the heavy office door closing behind me echoing like a final judgment. The drive back to our house, Julian's house, apparently, was a blur of tears, rage, and a strange, detached numbness that felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. Our beautiful heritage home, with its sprawling garden and welcoming porch swing, sat at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street in Port Blossom's oldest neighborhood. We'd bought it together, dreaming of filling its sun-drenched rooms with children's laughter. I sat in the driveway for a long time, staring at the cheerful blue front door and the climbing roses I'd so carefully tended. Everything looked exactly the same, Yet I felt like an alien, a ghost haunting the edges of a life that was no longer mine. Inside, the house was a museum of my delusion. A photo from our wedding on the mantelpiece, my hand in his, our smiles full of a future that would never exist. My art books nestled against his legal texts on the shelves. The ceramic mug I'd made in a pottery class, the one I used for my tea that very morning, was still sitting by the sink, a faint lipstick stain on the rim like evidence at a crime scene. With trembling hands, I called my mother. "Clara, darling." Her voice was carefully neutral, a practiced calm that set my teeth on edge. "Sophie said you might be calling." "She told you everything?" "She told me enough." "Oh, sweetheart, I know this is hard, but sometimes these things just happen." Julian and Sophie, they just make sense together. They're both so driven, so ambitious. "I'm ambitious," I interrupted, my voice tight. "I built my own business from nothing." "Of course you did, dear. And we're all very proud of your little studio." But let's be honest, Sophie moves in Julian's world. She understands the pressure, the drive. Perhaps this is just a natural course of events. A natural course of events. My mother was discussing my marriage as if it were a river changing its path, an inevitable force of nature. "So you're taking her side?" "There are no sides, Clara. I'm just being realistic. You and Julian have been growing apart for a long time. And Sophie, well, she didn't plan for this to happen. Love is a complicated thing." Love. They were calling this calculated betrayal love. "Where am I supposed to live, Mom?" "Well, you know you're always welcome here. Your room is just as you left it. And honestly, I could use the help around the house. It's getting to be a bit much for me on my own." There it was. My consolation prize. After my husband and sister carved up my life for their own convenience, I could return home to be my aging mother's live-in companion. "I need to think," I said, my throat closing up. "Of course. Take all the time you need." "But Clara," she added, her voice dropping into a warning, "try not to make things messy." "For everyone's sake. For everyone's sake. Not my sake. Everyone else's." I hung up the phone and poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive Merlot that Julian favored. Then another. And another. By the time he came home around 10, I was sitting in the darkened living room, the empty bottle on the table beside me, a cold, hard clarity settling in my soul. "Clara," he said carefully, loosening his tie. "We need to discuss logistics. The practical aspects of this transition. I've already spoken to a colleague about drawing up the papers." "Your lawyer," I said, my voice flat. "Clara, please don't repeat everything I say. It's childish." Childish. The woman whose life he had just systematically dismantled was being childish. "I've drawn up a reasonable settlement offer," he continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase and placing it on the coffee table. "Considering that most of our assets are tied to my inheritance or are in my name, I'm prepared to be generous. There's a lump sum payment, and I'll cover the cost of your moving expenses." I didn't bother to open the folder. "How much?" $30,000. "It's more than fair, considering." "Considering what?" "That you've been conducting a clandestine affair with my sister for 10 months under my nose." "Clara, I understand you're hurt." "Hurt?" I stood up, surprised by my own steadiness. "I'm not hurt, Julian. Hurt is when you accidentally drop a treasured vase. This is a demolition. This is the complete and utter annihilation of everything I believe to be true about my life, my family, and myself. Look, these things happen. People change." His voice took on a placating tone that grated on my raw nerves. "What Sophie and I have, it's real. It's a connection I've never experienced before." "And what about what we had?" "We were good friends who got married because it felt like the logical next step," he said, the words a clinical dissection of our shared history. "But be honest, Clara. When was the last time you looked at me with the kind of fire Sophie does? When was the last time we talked about anything deeper than the grocery list or whose turn it was to take out the recycling?" The terrible thing was, he wasn't entirely wrong. We had fallen into a routine. The passionate conversations had been replaced by comfortable silence. But I thought that was the nature of a long-term partnership, a settling into a deeper, quieter kind of love. I didn't realize it was a slow death. "So that gave you the right to cheat?" "I didn't plan it. Neither did Sophie. It just evolved. For 10 months. It just evolved. Clara, please, don't make this more difficult than it has to be. There it was again, that phrase. The family motto. Don't be difficult. Don't have feelings. Don't stand in the way of what we want. I want the house, I said, the words surprising me as much as him. Julian actually laughed. Clara, be serious. You can't afford the mortgage on your income and legally. I don't care about legally. I want this house. That's not how this works. I'm offering you a fair settlement. Take it. Or what? Or I'll file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, and you'll walk away with whatever the court decides to give you. Given that everything is in my name and we don't have children, I can assure you it won't be much. He had it all figured out. Julian Croft, Esquire, had anticipated every move, covered every angle. I was supposed to take my $30,000 and fade away quietly, leaving him and my sister to inhabit the life I had so carefully helped to build. When do you want me out? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. End of the month. That gives you 2 weeks to find somewhere else. 2 weeks. He was giving me 14 days to dismantle a life I'd spent years creating. Fine, I said. Julian looked surprised, then relieved. Fine. Fine. I'll be out by the end of the month. Good, he said, his professional calm restored. I'm glad we can handle this like adults. Like adults. The man who had been carrying on a secret affair with my sister wanted to congratulate us on our maturity. That night, after Julian had retreated to the guest room, apparently his conscience had some token limits, I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. I've always been a researcher. It's what made me a good designer. I delve into a client's story, understand their history, their values, their audience. I found the soul of their brand and gave it a visual voice. Now I turn those skills inward, to the wreckage of my own life, and I began to dig. By dawn, I understood. Julian hadn't just been careless. He'd been meticulous. The house, the investments, even our joint savings account, everything was structured to protect his assets. Every major purchase was carefully documented as coming from his premarital funds or his inheritance. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had been building a financial firewall around himself since the day we said I do. The betrayal was deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't a crime of passion, it was a premeditated act of emotional and financial erasure. And as the sun began to stream through the window, casting long shadows across my desk, something inside me shifted. The soft, accommodating current that was Clara Fields began to change course. It was no longer smoothing the stones. It was beginning to carve a new path through bedrock if it had to. The next few days were a blur of quiet packing and hollowed-out grief. I moved through my home like a ghost, wrapping plates, folding linens, deciding which fragments of my shattered life were worth taking with me. The doorbell rang 2 days later. It was Sophie, holding a small, elegant box from our favorite downtown patisserie, an expression of practiced sympathy on her face. Clara, we need to talk, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She placed the box on the kitchen counter and looked around at the stacks of cardboard boxes. I know you must hate me right now. Actually, I don't, I said, my voice quiet. Hate requires an energy I don't have. I'm just trying to understand. Good, she said, relieved. Because I truly believe we can get through this, as a family. As a family. The word was a mockery. Sophie, what you and Julian did, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice you made every day for 10 months. It was complicated, she insisted, her voice softening into a persuasive murmur. And Clara, you have to admit, you two weren't happy. You were living separate lives under the same roof. You were content, but you weren't alive. Julian needs someone who ignites him, not just comforts him. Her words were a series of tiny, precise cuts. She was painting me as a passive, uninteresting creature, a comfortable piece of furniture in Julian's more vibrant life. Were you ever going to tell me? Of course, she said, a little too quickly. We were just waiting for the right time. We didn't want to hurt you unless we were sure that what we had was real. How considerate of you, I said, the sarcasm a foreign taste in my mouth. Clara, don't be bitter. It doesn't suit you. She looked at me, a genuine, if condescending, pity in her eyes. Listen, in the long run, This will be good for you too. You'll find someone who is a better match for you. Someone who appreciates your gentler qualities. Gentler qualities. It was a euphemism for simple, for unambitious, for boring. I should go, she said, glancing at her phone. Julian's taking me to meet some of the senior partners at his firm tonight. It's important for his career that they see us as a solid unit. She was already stepping into my shoes, my life, my role. And I was expected to just step aside gracefully. Clara, she paused at the door, her hand on the knob. Try not to make this harder than it has to be. For everyone's sake. After she left, I stood in the middle of my half-packed living room and felt the last vestiges of my old self fall away. It wasn't anger that filled the void, not exactly. It was a cold, quiet resolve. A clarity as sharp and clear as a shard of glass. They thought they knew me. They thought I was the gentle current. They had no idea that even the gentlest water, when confined and put under enough pressure, can cut through stone. Evelyn Reed had an office that felt less like a law firm and more like a scholar's library. It was on a modest floor of a downtown heritage building, with tall windows that looked out over the bustling harbor of Port Blossom. The walls were lined with books, not just legal texts, but history, philosophy, and art. At 60, with a sharp, intelligent gaze and a mane of silver hair pulled back in an elegant clasp, she projected an aura of formidable calm. I'd found her after 3 sleepless nights of research, looking for someone who specialized not just in divorce, but in what the forums called complex marital dissolution. "Miss Fields," she said, after I had haltingly told her my story, her voice a low, soothing cello. She reviewed the settlement offer Julian had given me. "Your husband's proposal isn't just unreasonable. It's an insult to your intelligence and your contribution to this marriage." He said it was generous. "He's counting on you to be the person you've always been, accommodating and conflict-averse. The financial structuring, the timing of the asset acquisitions, this is a man who has been planning his exit strategy for a very long time." The words confirmed the cold dread that had been growing in my heart. So he never meant for it to last. "I cannot speak to his heart, Clara," she said, using my first name with a gentle authority. "But I can speak to his actions. And his actions are those of a man who viewed his marriage as a temporary arrangement with a built-in escape clause. The question is, what do you want?" "I want what's fair." Fair is a lovely concept, but the court deals in what is provable and what is demanded. So I ask you again, what do you want? I thought of Sophie's condescending pity, my mother's pragmatic betrayal, Julian's clinical dismissal of our life together. I thought of them moving into the home I had filled with love and light, of them building their future on the rubble of mine. "I want them to understand," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I want them to understand that I am not disposable. I will not be erased quietly." A slow, knowing smile touched Evelyn Reed's lips. "Now we have a strategy." Our first move was to reject Julian's offer and file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, demanding a full forensic accounting of all marital assets and subpoenaing all communications between him and Sophie for the past year. The papers were served to Julian on a Monday morning, in the lobby of his prestigious firm, by a professional process server. The phone call came less than an hour later. Julian's voice was no longer calm and professional, it was shaking with fury. "Clara, what in God's name is this?" "It's a divorce filing, Julian." "I thought that's what you wanted." "Adultery? Forensic accounting? You're demanding half of everything, including the house." "I'm demanding what my lawyer has advised me I am entitled to. We had an agreement." "No, Julian. You had a directive. I've decided not to follow it." There was a long, stunned silence. "You're making a terrible mistake, Clara. This is going to get ugly." "It's already ugly, Julian," I said, surprised by the steel in my voice. "I've just decided to stop pretending it isn't." He hung up on me. 2 hours later, Sophie was at my door, her face a mask of cold fury. "You have to stop this," she hissed, storming into my nearly empty living room. "Stop what, Sophie? Standing up for myself? You're being vindictive. You're trying to ruin Julian's career. Do you have any idea what an accusation of adultery and financial misconduct can do to a lawyer at his level? He should have thought of that before he decided to build his new life on top of mine." "Clara, Listen to me, she said, her voice dropping, a threat veiled in concern. You're picking a fight you can't win. Julian has connections. He will bury you. He'll drag your name through the mud. He'll make sure your little design business dries up. Is that what you want? I looked at my sister, at the woman who had shared my childhood, and saw a stranger. I saw someone so desperate to win that she would burn down everything in her path, including her own family. Get out of my house, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Clara, it's not my house, remember? But for the next week, it is. And I want you out of it. After she left, I called Evelyn. They're threatening me, I told her, my hands shaking slightly. Good, Evelyn said calmly. Rattled people make mistakes. Document everything, Clara. Every call, every text, every threat. Your husband may be a lawyer, but he's forgotten the first rule of litigation. Never underestimate a quiet opponent. They rarely have anything left to lose. The pressure began to build in small, significant ways. A senior partner at Croft and Sterling called Evelyn's office to inquire about a discreet resolution, a clear sign the firm was worried about its reputation. Then, an influential real estate blogger in Port Blossom published a blind item about a certain high-flying agent whose messy personal entanglements are raising eyebrows among clients who value discretion. Sophie's name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't need to be. The most surprising crack in their fortress came from Julian's mother, a woman who had always treated me with a polite but distinct coolness. She called me one evening, her voice thick with emotion. Clara, my dear. I've just heard about the situation. I want you to know I am absolutely appalled at my son's behavior. His father would be ashamed. She paused. I hope you fight for everything you deserve, dear. Don't let him bully you. I hung up, a wave of unexpected validation washing over me. They had thought their betrayal was a private matter, a simple reshuffling of their lives. They hadn't counted on the fact that actions have ripples, that reputations are fragile, and that a woman with nothing left to lose is a powerful force. The final meeting took place in a sterile, glass-walled conference room at a neutral law firm. Julian sat across the polished table, looking haggard. He was flanked by his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Peterson. Sophie was not present. Evelyn began, her voice calm and steady. My client is prepared to accept a settlement. She will waive the claim for alimony in exchange for the full title to the marital home, free and clear of any mortgage, which your client will be responsible for, plus a cash settlement of $350,000. Peterson scoffed. That's preposterous. The house alone is worth over $700,000. Indeed, Evelyn said, smiling faintly. It's a beautiful home. My client put a great deal of love into it. And my client's silence on the matter of your client's professional and personal conduct is also quite valuable. We believe our offer reflects that value. Julian finally spoke, his voice strained. Clara, this is insane. This isn't a settlement. It's extortion. I looked at him, the man I had once loved with all my quiet heart. No, Julian, I said, my voice clear and steady in the silent room. Extortion is when you take something that isn't yours. This is a reclamation. I'm simply taking back a piece of the life you and my sister tried to steal from me. The media attention, the rumors, you're destroying me, he whispered, his eyes pleading. Your actions are destroying you, I corrected him gently. I'm just holding up a mirror. I saw the fight go out of him then. He looked across the table, not at a vindictive ex-wife, but at a woman he no longer recognized, a woman who had found her own strength in the ruins he had created. He slumped in his chair and nodded curtly to his lawyer. The agreement was signed. I kept the house. The blue front door, the climbing roses, the garden I had poured my soul into. For the first few weeks, it felt haunted by memories, but slowly, I began to fill it with my own life. I painted the living room a warm, sunny yellow. I turned the formal dining room we never used into a spacious, light-filled art studio. I hosted dinner parties for my friends, filling the rooms with laughter. My business, which Sophie had threatened to ruin, began to thrive. A local magazine did a feature on my work, highlighting my focus on authentic, story-driven design. The article mentioned, briefly and elegantly, my recent personal upheaval, and my commitment to helping others find their voice. The day it came out, my inbox was flooded with inquiries from women starting new businesses, women rebuilding their lives, women who wanted their own stories told with integrity and beauty. I saw Sophie once, about a year later. She was showing a condo downtown. She looked thinner, her usual radiant confidence replaced by a brittle edge. We made eye contact for a moment across the street. There was no smile, no anger, just a flicker of something that looked like regret before she turned away. I heard through the grapevine that her relationship with Julian had imploded just months after the settlement. Apparently, their great, passionate love couldn't survive the mundane realities of financial strain and a tarnished reputation. Julian had left Port Blossom, taking a less prestigious job in another state. My mother and I are slowly, carefully rebuilding our relationship. It's built on a new foundation of honesty. She comes over for tea in my garden now, the one she once suggested I return home to tend for her. Last week, she looked at the vibrant beds of flowers I had planted. "Your father always said you had deep roots, Clara," she said softly. I never truly understood what he meant until now. I don't hate them anymore. Hate is a fire that consumes the person who holds it, and I am too busy building my new life to tend to such a destructive flame. But I have not forgiven them. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a requirement for healing. Some betrayals are so profound they alter the landscape of your life forever. You don't forgive the earthquake, you simply learn to build on the new ground. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm sitting in my studio, the scent of turpentine and paper in the air, I think about that woman who stood frozen in the doorway of her husband's office. I feel a deep, aching tenderness for her trusting heart and her quiet belief in the goodness of others. She is not gone. She is part of me, the soft earth from which this stronger version of myself has grown. My new life is not a grand, dramatic masterpiece. It's more like my old life, but the composition is my own. It is a life filled with quiet joy, meaningful work, and the steady, unshakable knowledge of my own worth. I am no longer a gentle current in the lives of others. I am the river itself, carving my own path, deep and clear and true, to an ocean I am only just beginning to discover. And it is more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined.